And we'll mute then.
So just as a reminder, only the panelists are to talk. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat.
We're on, Dr. Myers.
Good evening, and we're back for another show, COVID-19 Conversations. And today we're touching on something that a lot of us have unfortunately had to deal with this year, and that's grief. I can't believe that we're up to session number 16. This just started as a simple, we need to get into the community and talk to people about COVID. And now it's grown into so much more. So we thank all of you for continuing to support us. And this is going to be another great show as we've provided for you in the past. So as usual, our co-moderators are going to be myself, Dr. Allison Myers, and Dr. Maya Williams. So unfortunately, at this point, the total number of cases of coronavirus or COVID-19 have continued to grow, not only worldwide, but especially exponentially here in the United States. As of this week, we have roughly 65 million cases around the world, but unfortunately, about a little over 14 million of them are right here in the United States. Last month, we surpassed the 250,000 mark of deaths, but thankfully, most people have recovered from coronavirus. But we have seen that on a daily basis, we're losing thousands and thousands of people. So we're hoping that people will take it seriously to socially distance as well as wearing your mask. And when we say wear your mask, please cover both your nose and your mouth. I have seen people walking around with a mask that ends here, but we need to make sure that we're covering both the nose and the mouth and make sure that we have a good seal on the side of the face in order to keep the droplets out. So we all know that COVID has also disproportionately affected those of us who are of color. And if we look at the CDC's website, we can see that when compared to white Americans, there are more cases among the American Indian population, Asian population, as well as the African American or Black and the Hispanic populations. We also notice that the hospitalizations are much higher across all ethnic groups, especially for Native American, Hispanic, and Black. And deaths, unfortunately, have also been greater amongst Native Americans, Blacks, and Hispanics. And so when we talk about what we're dealing with, we're grieving. Not only are we dealing with numerous losses to COVID, but we've also had people around us that we love and care for who've died from other things such as heart attack, stroke, because these conditions continue to plague our communities. So when we think about the process of dealing with loss, it's a process of grieving. And I think that Rabbi Earl Grolman said it most succinctly. Each person's grief journey is unique as a fingerprint or a snowflake. So we all are going to process this differently, and we're all going to deal with it differently. And today we're hoping that we can learn some of the more helpful, more positive ways of dealing with grief. And again, our grief is coming from the fact that we're dealing with this immense change in our life and our socialization due to COVID, but also for those of us, especially of color, also dealing with what's been going on with police brutality. And I think this is another succinct quote. Some of the mourning is refracted through what seems like an endless array of challenges that Black folks must continue to face. But much of it is also reflected in the sad fact that disparate death rates and Black mourning are permanent features of the lived experience in Black America. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these inequality that we as persons of the African diaspora are dealing with are continue to plague us, whether it's from coronavirus, police brutality. And unfortunately, in June, a Washington Post Ipsos poll found that nearly 1 in 3 Black Americans know someone who personally died from COVID-19, and the death rate amongst Black individuals is up to 10 times higher than among white individuals. So that's why it's important for us to continue to get the mental health that we need and to have these discussions as a community. And again, these are just a breakdown of some of the different people we've lost this year, whether it be George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and whether it be Kobe Bryant, Chadwick Boseman, or John Lewis. We've lost many great people in our communities. And a lot of people are also mourning the fact that they've lost their jobs. A lot of people, unfortunately, have been furloughed and laid off this year due to COVID. And of course, celebrations that we would have normally enjoyed, such as weddings or vacations, we haven't been able to enjoy this year as well. So we would like for today's show, once again, thank our co-sponsor, Alpha to Omega Youth Services. We would like to thank Dr. Naomi Maria and Ms. Tiffany Harvin from Northwell. Also, Mr. Dwayne Cumberbatch, the head of Alpha to Omega Youth Services, for once again sponsoring one of our shows, as well as the Department of Medicine at Northwell, the Chayor, all of our Day One audience members. And please remember to follow us. We are at Twitter. We can find us at Minority Health 3, or you can find us on Instagram at minorityhealth.combos. So now let's talk about some of our panelists today. So our first panelist is somebody that we've had on our show before, and we just felt the need to bring her back because her story is so impactful. This is Miss Emmeline Taylor, who lost her beloved husband, Mr. Jules Taylor. You can see them pictured here. And also, I just want to say that we honored her at North Shore University Hospital where her husband was. And this is actually the spot where he was located as he fought the good fight for COVID-19. And the staff in this area, which is the PACU, it used to be our surgical recovery area, but we actually had to turn it into an intensive care unit because we had as many as 600 to 700 patients with COVID during the height of the pandemic. And they actually put a plaque here and renamed this spot after Mr. Jules Taylor. So this was the unveiling. Mrs. Taylor had no idea what the PACU was up to. She thought she was just coming in for a little simple, come say hi to everybody, but they surprised her with this plaque and flowers. And I was very happy to be invited to be a part of this. So that's Mrs. Taylor here. And you can see we're all masked up. A little close, but it was quick for a picture. But it's just that she and her husband made such an impact on the staff that they wanted to honor. So I just wanted to show that here. We also have one of our wonderful psychiatrists from Northwell Health, Dr. Laura Hanna. And last but not least, another returning guest to our show, Ms. Simone Wilson, who's a career coach and organizational development leader to help us talk about how to deal with the loss of job. So now I will turn this over to my co-host, Dr. Maya Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Myers, and thank you for the panelists and all the participants. Again, we would like you to mute. We only want the participants to be speaking. If you have any questions, please direct them to Dr. Myers, or you could directly, or you could post them in the chat. So as usual, we start off with the COVID-19 survivor, and in this case, the widow. It has actually been 7 months since Mr. Taylor died. Mrs. Taylor, can you please tell us how your story, tell us more about your story in terms of life after Mr. Taylor and COVID-19? How are you doing and how are you coping?
So thank you so much, first and foremost, for having me back. This is such a wonderful opportunity to just keep learning and sharing. So life after Jules has been quite a roller coaster, and at times seems that time just flies by. Most days I'm good. I get out of bed. I do my best to have a productive day and not cry. Others, not so much, and it's slightest thing that set me off. A song, food smell, a message on Facebook. I'm grateful and thankful to share a few cool things that have happened since we last spoke that have helped my healing process, as well as continue to keep my legacy of Jules alive. His tennis club named an award after him, the Jules Taylor Jr. Humanitarian Award. They made me the first recipient, and they said they would give one out each year. The Haitian Times published an article that they wrote about our COVID story and a short video. As Dr. Myers mentioned, the PACU came together and had a plaque put up. I will be forever, ever grateful to them for the 22 days that they took such amazing care of Jules. The paperwork for his street co-naming has been submitted. I'm also grateful to our new Queensborough president, Donovan Richards, formerly the council member for District 31, for making the generous offer and then making sure it happened. The other day, he sent me a text just to check in on me. I'm so blessed to have so many people, an entire army of them, that check for me all the time. Physically, I'm in a good place. Spiritually, I'm in a great place. Not sure what I would do or where I would be without my faith and lots of prayer. Emotionally, that's still very much a struggle. Living in our space, our home, is much harder than I thought it would ever be. But right now, I don't have much of a choice. So I continue to soldier forward, taking each day just 1 hour at a time sometimes. As it relates to coping, I know I sound like a broken record, but some days better than others. I've been keeping myself busy with various service projects and helping those who are truly in need of some basics right now. Many would be surprised what those are. Those are the things that connect me to Jules and the things that we would be doing together. I also do a lot in his name and his memory as I tell our story so others can get to know him through me and his legacy can continue to live on.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very impactful. I really love the way that you're continuing to honor his memory. I think that's amazing. And I guess, like they say, like time heals. But like we were discussing earlier, sometimes when you think you do not have any more tears, then the tears keep coming down. So thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Hannah. Mrs. Taylor appears to be doing a lot for her to survive, for her to cope. Can you tell us a little bit
Lauren
more?
is coming on now.
What individuals can do? What are some of the resources that they can access for those who are having issues with grief after the loss of a loved one, or the inability to be with surviving family members and friends during the holiday season?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. So I think it's an important thing to consider because as we started, it's grief is so much grief. We're all experiencing grief as a community. So many of us are losing loved ones, which is bereavement. And the real difference between like feelings of depression and feelings of grief or bereavement is this concept of loss. So bereavement being losing, a loved one, but grief being a more umbrella term for just all the different types of loss that we've experienced in 2020. I think when I think about the ways that we can try to best cope through a loss, I think that first and foremost, making sure that we're safe. Now, not everybody, a small amount of people will have very severe experiences to grief and loss. And so if there's anyone out there who is experiencing grief and loss and are having unsafe thoughts of hurting themselves, I think the most important thing to do is to seek emergent help. That's the first thing I want to say. You can go to a nearest emergency room. You can call the National Suicide Hotline. Suicidepreventionlifeline.org is the website for the National Suicide Hotline, and the National Suicide Hotline number is 1-800-273-8255. Now, for those who are not experiencing emergent distress like that, it's important to do things because when we're grieving and mourning, we're going to be changed permanently, but we do have control over how the scars heal. And there are several things that you can do on a personal level. And then if a personal level is not enough, like it's not enough quite for many people, I always encourage seeking professional help to have a guide to help you through the scar formation process of the grief process. I usually tell people that it's very important to get back to basics, right? So basics for me mean like sleep. Attend to your sleep, make sure that you're sleeping properly. Professional help can help with giving guidance on sleep hygiene and ways to make sure you're sleeping well, focusing on breathing and meditation through difficult periods, focusing on optimizing the health of what you're eating, making sure that you're on a schedule. When you're waking up, when you're going to sleep is on schedule. When you're having meals, that you're doing things productive, trying to do something that's that you enjoy, and then reaching out to friends and family, because the term is social distancing, but we're really trying to physically distance, but we can communicate with friends and family via the internet, via Zoom, via Facebook, things like this. And I think that for people who need a little bit more help, like most of us do, I definitely recommend reaching out for professional help to help guide us through the grief process if we need it. The things that some resources to reach for professional help. One place is Psychology Today. You can find social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists who are advertising their services. Another great resource I tell people is zocdoc.com, zocdoc.com. It's a great place to find professionals by specialty, by insurance, and by zip code. So those are some of the initial resources that I counsel people just in trying to get through the hard times of 2020.
Thank you for that as well. And also we have, it's usually been said that Black women are actually the face of coronavirus. Also, something I recommend to people is therapy for Black girls. There's this directory that they could also use if they're looking for other women of color to help them process the grief or to help them process whatever they're going through in life. That's another great resource. And speaking of, earlier we mentioned that people are not only mourning the loss of loved ones, but also social injustices, loss of jobs, reduced work hours coupled with having to work from home. Employers appear to be unprepared to deal with the grief, just like employees are, which have resulted in high levels of burnout, stress, anxiety, depression, and reduced productivity. So Simone, what should employers and to some extent employees be doing? So what should employers be doing to help employees cope during this time?
First, Dr. Williams, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this conversation. Um, I would say one of the first things I'd say for employers is really to listen. Start creating spaces where you can actually listen to your employees and what they're saying. Another piece is really communicating often and in different ways, because it will definitely help staff to get a better understanding, employees to get a better understanding of what's going on in the organization. Encouraging managers to have intentional and regular check-in with their staff members, and not just only about how you're doing with the work, but just really having conversations with them about how they themselves are doing. Ongoing review of the organizational policies, because with COVID, things have changed. Some policies that were working maybe a year ago might have to be amended just in light of what we're currently experiencing. Revisit expectations, because I think a lot of times we have the bottom line, performance and productivity. Yes, we definitely want that, or employers definitely want that, but also revisiting what is realistic versus what's aspirational. Can you build in flexibility, because employees are operating from different places and need a level of flexibility in terms of how they do their work. And also the reality is what employers do during this time in terms of how they resource and support their staff members will be remembered post-COVID. So definitely ensuring that you're taking the overall well-being of your employees into consideration, because at the end of the day, the employees are producing, and you also want to support them as they navigate different challenges that they're currently experiencing.
Thank you for that. Also, I know that at Northwell, we have the Employee Assistant Program. I think Dr. Hannah and Dr. Myers, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we offer free counseling services at Northwell for our employees in the event that, they want to be able to cope or they're unable to deal with the grief.
And I just also wanted to add to that, most companies do have the EAP services, but also ensuring that it's being communicated to staff and how they can access it. Because it's one thing to have it, but if it's employees are not informed about it, then it's just a service that's somewhere. So I just wanted to add.
Yeah, and that's
And
very
just
important.
one other thing, I
Sorry.
was going to say also, sometimes people don't want to go through their insurance, so they may not want to use that. So you might also want to comment on that. Some people prefer not, because when your insurance, when you have a psychiatric condition and reported to your insurance, some people are concerned about that. So can maybe you talk about that as well?
This issue of insurance is one of the real challenging things in this day and age, because the reality is that there is a shortage of mental health providers for the need, and it can be very difficult for people to find mental health providers, both who take insurance and also who don't take insurance. So I think that whereas I understand the concern about wanting to not take insurance, and definitely if you have the means to seek out services like that, I encourage it. There are great providers in both spaces, but I think that unfortunately one of the crises in social determinants of health is the lack of Medicaid for all, the lack of universal health care. And what that means is that for the vast majority of people, like the quality healthcare is inaccessible financially outside of the insurance system. And I think that given that challenge, it still is we can still find quality healthcare, even though the ability to go out of the insurance system is not always accessible for most. The EAP program is a great program. Another for people who are Northwell affiliated. Northwell employees are health insurance. Everyone within mental health takes the health insurance, and one great resource for Northwell employees is to maybe first call our crisis center. It's a place that has a lot of resources in connecting people to services, but they can also be like the first step in connecting to see if there are services from within our own team. And there are various different paths toward that. EAP is one path. There are, I think, for first line healthcare workers, like there's been talk of people within our psychiatry departments taking on first line healthcare workers, but there's various different paths. I think the first step is really reaching out. Our crisis center number is 718-470-8100. That's for people who are in like the Queens, Long Island border area, and that could be a great resource in addition to some of the other ones mentioned, EAP, ZocDoc, Psychology Today.
And also, I think that there is a sliding scale that individuals can also access. Like, I don't know if it's for if they do not have insurance, or if they do not have, as much, like, the salary is not, or they do not have the funds to be able to pay. Is there a sliding scale, or in some of our facilities have sliding scales that individuals can use to pay for therapy?
They do. So usually how that works is if you do not have a insurance that our clinic accepts, then the offer of like private pay, but with a sliding scale, and the usual situation is that once you get in contact with the first line, say crisis center or whatever, then they would put you in contact with our billing department, and then there are certain requirements in terms of like providing like documentation to be able to access that system. So it's not something that it is something that is available in the situations where we don't accept the insurance, or a person does not have insurance and they're needing to access services.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just wanted to put in a plug. Everybody's going crazy over your hair. And I think the best comment was stated by Mindy, where she said, "Sis, your hair is giving me life." So, and we've mentioned that before, like your hair is just amazing. So just wanted to let you do that.
Oh, well, much thanks. I've been thinking about doing a tutorial, so anyone interested can go to find Dr. Lala, DRLALA, on YouTube, or drlala.org, and you send me a message, and I can tell you the hair secrets as well.
Okay, thank you for that plug. Dr. Myers, please feel free to write this down and let people know that she's available. The next question is from Mrs. Taylor. What advice do you have for anyone who will be going through this difficult time of like mourning and grieving for their loved ones during the holidays?
So one of the things that I would say is join groups that have people that truly understand what you're going through because they have the same shared experience. It doesn't need to be the same loss, but the connection definitely helps. I'm grateful every day to my teams and armies that check on me, that check for me, and ensure that I'm okay. But being able to speak to someone who walked the same road as I did is also a great way to start to heal and or be a help to someone who needs to heal. Also, find a way to be with whomever will be the best support system for you during the holidays. And if you cannot be with them, consider going away and spending some time with yourself. It's really a good healing process to unplug, remember, cry, laugh, and yes, sometimes even smile. I would love to quickly share my Thanksgiving story. As the date approached, I was not sure how I was going to react. The only thing I knew was that I wanted to go and be with my blood family in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I say blood family because I have a ton of extended family in New York, but I wanted my sister, my mom, my nieces, my nephews, and I was so looking forward to it. Then the COVID number started to rise, and my sister had to call me with the bad news that I couldn't come. I broke down in tears and I cried for 3 days. I knew I wanted to go home, but I could not. And I knew I could not stay in our home. I ended up looking up and booking a getaway at a holistic bed and breakfast. And I truly believe that God led me there. And it was just what I needed to continue my healing journey. I ended up watching the memorial service that we did for Jules. And as I turned it on, I didn't know if I would be crying the entire time or smiling the entire time. I'm grateful to say that I smiled for most of it, hearing the love people had for him and the wonderful man that he was truly, truly touched me in a whole different way. Lastly, find ways to infuse positive fun into all the sad times. The holidays, going to the cemetery, anniversaries and birthdays. They will help so much to buffer the sadness and make those times not feel like you just can't, but the courage to be a part of them. I want to send out a special shout out to a few ladies who are actually here supporting today, who have been part of those people that have come with me to the cemetery and come with me to church and come with me to dinner to allow those times to not just feel like just so sad and so horrible. So those are the things that I would suggest.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Taylor. We have a question for the chat for Dr. Hannah. Someone was asking, are telehealth services available to support people who are dealing with grieving or issues such as that?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So, at Northwell, the majority of the outpatient services are via telehealth. So, and I think that telehealth also there are more people in the New York area have opened up for in-person appointments since the first wave, but I think that there's a lot more availability for telehealth appointments. Definitely, all the outpatient services at Northwell have majority of that option, and other places as well. So I think that that's an excellent option for saving time, for kind of having services in the safety and the comfort of your home.
And if someone on the show today says, I want to see Dr. Hannah, are your services available?
It's an excellent question. So my services are available in a limited amount. This is something that's very crucial when you're seeking out a mental health provider. The fit has to be right, you know, and so it's always good to kind of shop around. For anyone who's interested in accessing my services, reach out and I can do like a brief screening and then let you know if if the fit seems right for a variety of reasons, or if I can help connect you to a better fit. I am planning to put any kind of more general questions that come in terms of mental health services that might benefit many people in terms of healthy practices. I'm planning to put some videos up just for people who aren't able to access my services specifically. But anyone who is looking for services, definitely reach out. It's definitely a good idea to get a guide to help you through coping, through mourning, through anxiety, depression, through any kind of mental health challenges that you may be experiencing.
Thank you. And this question is for Simone. Mental health there's a stigma attached to mental health, and there's usually there's discrimination against mental health as well. And so usually employees do not want to report that they have like depression or anxiety, and so they will not be using the insurance at the organization because they do not want that stigma attached. How, if an individual has, say, depression or absolutely cannot cope, what do you suggest to that individual in terms of how should they report that, hey, I have anxiety or I have depression, and what should they do in the event that they do not want the employer to find out that they are suffering for these things?
First, I'm going to say, not as a mental health professional, let me put that up front, but just in general, I would say for a particular individual who might be experiencing that or feeling that they need the assistance, I think it's also getting clear of what resources are available. Because I think sometimes when we're navigating a lot of things, it could seem as if there's just not enough that's available. One of the things they can do is utilize their employee handbook to see what is available in there or what's been extended. For some companies, it is that time of the year when they're doing enrollment for different benefits. So I'd go back to my health insurance to see what are some of the things that are included in some of the benefits that I already have, and how can I navigate that. With that in mind, I would also say, I think a lot of times and over the years, the stigma to mental health has caused a lot of us to suffer in silence. And I'm aware that not necessarily wanting to put all your business out there, but also making sure that that might not necessarily be the first thought, but how do you get the service or the resources that is needed so you could get to where you need to be. So I wouldn't necessarily say go advertising, but having conversations with HR, generic conversations to say, what are some of the resources that are available? Having conversation with close friends. This is a situation I'm navigating. What are some of the thoughts you have, or what have you utilized before? But I am going to say the first thing is definitely ensuring that you're getting the assistance that you need and not necessarily suffering in silence, because I think a lot of times when we have that stigma, it will hinder us from receiving the resource or the support that we need. So I would make the understanding that the stigma is valid, but not necessarily letting that be that first thing, so that you suffer in silence, but exploring all the resources, whether it's through your employee handbook, your benefits handbook, having a conversation with HR just to see what's available, and also reaching out to people who you trust to get some advice, but definitely ensuring that you're getting the resource and the support that you need, because I think we all need to ensure that we're putting ourselves first and protecting our overall well-being, not just the physical, but the mental as well. So not suffering in silence, and the stigma, yes, it's there, but also thinking about your well-being as an individual.
Also, a comment on the insurance question. So mental health records are the most protected records of health records. All health records are protected under HIPAA, and mental health records are even more protected. What that means, for example, like where I work, is not even the other medical doctors from other specialties can access our mental health records. They're only we can access them as the mental health professionals. So for if you are needing services, please don't let the concern about using insurance deter you, because even though you're using insurance and even though there are records, these are very protected, and there's confidentiality laws and requirements that all mental health professionals abide by.
Thank you. And this question I want to ask to Simone and Dr. Hannah. Earlier during the year, Black people were really suffering. We, as Dr. Myers mentioned in the PowerPoint, that we had more to mourn than just the death of our loved ones. We were seeing social injustices every single day on the television. We had to watch the almost 10 minutes of Judge Floyd being murdered in front of us. And then there was the Breonna Taylor, verdict. And sometimes, even with all of that going on, with our family members being sick, with our family members dying, we still have to show up to work. We still have to smile. We still have to submit, everything else. We still have reports to submit. How do you advise individuals who have to do this, even now during the holidays? For example, there are probably international students, there are probably international employees like myself who probably cannot go home to spend Christmas with my family. How do you suggest that these individuals we deal with? How do you suggest we cope? What do you suggest we do during the holidays to be able to mourn the things that we have lost?
I'm going to say, and this is something I've been practicing myself, so let full disclosure, being kind to yourself. Because I think a lot of times we engage in certain self-talk, or we're navigating so much, it's easier to be hard on ourselves and beat ourselves up. But I definitely would say be kind to ourselves. Another thing is reconnect with what brings you joy. And I think one of the blessings of COVID with everything else that's been going on, is it's given us, some of us, the opportunity to slow down and reconnect with what energizes us, what brings us joy. And it's almost in a weird way, reconnect with ourselves. We are still busy. A lot of us still have the boundaries between home and work, especially if you're working from home, is pretty much null and void. But I'm also going to encourage to really put some level of structure or boundaries in place, because it's easy to sit in front of a computer and before you know it, you didn't have lunch, you didn't have dinner, you didn't get up to do anything. So I'm definitely going to say, as best as possible, putting some boundaries in place and reconnecting with what brings you joy and energizes you, because I think that affects our mood, our overall mood, and that will definitely help as we start going through the different things. The last piece I'm going to say is stay connected. I think Dr. Hannah said it's social distancing versus physical distancing. Although you might not necessarily be able to be there in person, how can you stay connected? I'll give you a story. In my family, we're using WhatsApp. We have a little group chat going on. So that's an opportunity for us to stay engaged, and also just listen to some of the different things that's going on and share jokes. So finding that space where you can laugh, because for some of us, laughter, we've realized that it's almost as if we've gotten away from it. So finding things that bring you joy, finding things that energizes you. I've bought a glue gun. What am I going to do with it? I fixed a couple of things, but you know what? I found that it brings me joy. Be careful, but in the same breath, I think it's really reconnecting with some of those things that energize us and bring us joy, and definitely staying connected with family, friends, and we have a lot of technology. So how best to use the technology to help us stay connected?
Yeah, I definitely agree with those recommendations. So definitely about the staying connected to your loved ones virtually. And when you say find your joy, so there is a a type of therapy type of skills called dialectical behavioral therapy, and we would call that accumulating positive experiences. And these are things that this is one way that you can prophylax, like protect yourself from the stresses of life. Like and then again, when I say if you need to, you can find a guide to help you with some of these challenges. So DBT, for example, helps people prophylact from life stresses and also prepares them with the coping tools to deal with emotional emergencies. So accumulating positive experiences, finding things that are joyful is definitely one core piece of that. And I counsel people like get back to basics. Are you sleeping? 7 to 9 hours is what we should be aiming for. Are we getting quality sleep? Are we kind of, practicing proper sleep hygiene? If that's the first time you've heard that term, sleep hygiene, a mental health professional can tell you what it is and how to do it, So if your sleep is on track, are you breathing and meditating okay to deal with when the waves of either grief, bereavement come, or the waves of anxiety from all of the challenges that we're going through? Are you optimizing your diet? Are you moving, doing things to exercise? And are you keeping on a schedule? All of these things can be scheduled in a consistent way. And it's a way to keep sane when 2020 is just coming at us in all different directions. Or if you're working from home, or if you lost your job because of COVID, it's a way to keep on a ritual that's healthy, a schedule for the day that's healthy. So schedule your life and focus on the basics of, human health, and seek out a guide to help you as a mental health professional if you need to. Definitely.
Thank you for that. The next question is for Mrs. Taylor. What are some of the ways that people can memorialize? I'm sorry. I couldn't say the word tonight. But what are some of the ways that people can honor the memories of their loved ones during this time?
Thank you. So a few ways that I would like to share, but by no means the only ways. If you belong to a church together, have a plaque placed either at your favorite pew or any other marker point at church. We did that for Jules's mom. She loved to sit in the first pew right in front of the priest. And we would all sit there. He would fall asleep and I would poke him because we're in front of the priest and you need to wake up. But when she passed, we had a plaque put there on the right side of the first pew. And when the Lord called him home, our priest allowed us to put a plaque for him on the other side. So when I do go to church, it's a little sad because I sit in that first pew. But it's also a great way to feel close and connected to them both. When I come in, I kind of tap the plaques and leave a kiss for Jules and do the same thing as I'm leaving. So that's a great way. Have a special mass sung in their honor. Have a special ornament made with a piece of their clothing. Some of my sorority sisters from my undergrad chapter gave me a blanket that had pictures of us on it. My teammates in my department at work had a beautiful rosary made with his picture, his name, sunrise, and sunset date. So whenever I choose to pray the rosary, I use that. We had an event at school for All Saints Day where they asked you to bring something personal and special, so I brought that. Start a scholarship in their name. People think scholarship and they think I don't have the money. It doesn't need to be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It can be you find a student in college who's starting college and give them $100 towards their books. It could be, anything. But if you do it in your loved one's name, then that just helps to carry their name forward. Sponsor part of an event for something they were passionate about. Give to others during the holiday season in their memory. Continue to find opportunities like this, like the one today, to tell their story and your journey after their transition as a way to help yourself and help others.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Hannah, so many significant others or loved ones are dealing with what is called survivor's guilt. Can you explain what that is and how that can be alleviated?
So, yeah, survivor's guilt is a concept that well, the way I think about it is, so when we, for mental health professionals, we go to guides like this. This is the DSM-5, and it helps guide us through some of the more common things that that humans encounter, like in terms of dealing with life stressors, trying to normalize this, because a lot of people pathologize having mental health problems, but they're very common, and life is hard, and this is just a way to kind of categorize how life is hard for all people. So survivor's guilt was a concept that was in the last version, the DSM-4 TR. This new version, DSM-5, they took it out. But I think that the idea behind it is that this like depression, or dysphoria. Dysphoria is like, I think when people, non health professionals think about depression, they're talking about dysphoria. Both dysphoria and survivor's guilt, these are symptoms that are non-specific. So what does that mean? That means like if you have a fever, that's a non-specific symptom. It could be due to a lot of different things, right? You could have, cold, flu, pneumonia, God forbid, COVID. It doesn't tell you exactly what's going on. And survivor's guilt and also dysphoria are similar in that way, where it could indicate a variety of different things. Survivor's guilt can happen in a major depressive episode. It can happen in if people are having PTSD reactions to like all of the lynchings of Black people we're seeing on TV all the time. It can happen in bereavement, where you've lost a personal person and you're feeling guilty about them having left. It can happen in small degrees, like like a lot of mental health professionals feel a type of survivor's guilt, just in like we're seeing all of our colleagues going off into the front lines of COVID, and we're here working from home, and there's some survivor's guilt there. So I think that it can really manifest in it can really be a harbinger of a lot of different possible problems. And so if you're experiencing it, and you're also feeling like it's persistent, coming with other problems, making it hard for you to function, hard for you to deal with your day, I think that the best thing that you can do is seek out help from a professional, and they can help figure out what is the cause of the symptom of survivor's guilt you're having, how serious it is, and like give you some good tips on how to work through it, so that as you're healing, you're controlling the scar tissue of what forms. So it'll take time, and that the time is different for everybody. Everyone's grief and process is different, but you have some control over like the outcome as you go through the process.
Thank you. I think I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Myers. There's something in the chat.
So I think Diane made a very excellent point, and I see that Mrs. Taylor agreed to it. Diane commented, "It's so important to build good memories. These are all we have to call on now. Imagine the times we wished we did not have to see someone. This is now a reality for one reason or another." And I think especially for our elderly community, this is such a valid point, that because of fears of us younger people giving them COVID, that a lot of older people are suffering right now because they're not able to get visits from their loved ones or friends.
Thank you for that. That was a very powerful statement. I'd like to shift gears a little to go back to the job market. So more than twice as many jobs that are lost during the Great Depression due to the current pandemic. How can someone get back into the job market after a job loss in such a bad economy? And Simone, what are the strategies people can use during the job search and interviewing process?
So first, Dr. Williams, I definitely want to acknowledge the reality that a lot of people are navigating as it relates to the job search and just employment in general, and also realize that majority of our waking hours, or the hours that we're awake, is spent at work. So for a lot of people, there's a level of identity with what they do in their employment. So just a few strategies or thoughts in terms of different ways to get back into the job market. I think revisit your career goals and start thinking differently about how you can move those goals forward. So a lot of times we have goals, but now it's just okay. Let's think differently about how to move it forward. Is it enhancing or broadening our skills? Is it pivoting to a new industry? Is it taking some short-term roles in an opportunity to build up our finances and or our skill set? Create a job search plan and a schedule. I think the benefit of that, it gives you structure and it also helps to maximize your time. Be open to support. A lot of times we might not see things a certain way. I always say we're in the frame, we're in the picture, so we don't always see the frame. So this is that wonderful opportunity for someone to offer a different perspective and also just to work with us or guide us through the challenges we might be experiencing as we job search. And the other piece is to be flexible. COVID has brought about a lot of changes in almost in every industry, some industries more than others. So really starting to look at your skill set to say, okay, how can I transfer this to another industry and what's possible or another location and or role? In terms of some of the strategies that people can use during the job search, I'm going to say look at the job opening or the job posting and really start just not looking at the years of experience they're looking for, because I think a lot of times we look at the years of experience and we might disqualify ourselves to say, well, I don't have it. Don't necessarily look at that alone, but look at what is it that the employer is asking for? What is the problem they're looking to have solved? Then utilize that to look back at your own personal skill set and your own assets, I call them. Get clear on what you bring and how do you communicate what you bring to an employer? Because you start thinking, okay, what is the problem that they're having? And how can I leverage my skills, the experiences I've gained over the years, as well as my strengths to help them solve that problem, and then be able to communicate that during the interview process. Strengthen relationships with your network. Build a friend or get a friend before you need a friend, because there are a lot of times within the your network process where some jobs might not necessarily be advertised and you might be able to hear from someone else. So it's a great opportunity to strengthen relationships. And I'm also going to say improve your interview skills. I think a lot of times if you haven't interviewed in years, it could be a whole new world, and then you have to interview virtually. So definitely start practicing. Practice and preparation will definitely be helpful. It'll also strengthen your confidence so that you go in and courageously and competently articulate the value you bring and what you're looking to, what you can offer to the company. And to add this again, engage in activities that's gonna strengthen your overall well-being. The job search is a process. I wish I could say it's gonna take you 2 days, 2 months, 6 months, but for some people, unfortunately, it's longer. It is a process. So definitely start building in things that's going to help to rebuild your overall well-being and taking care of not just your physical, but your mental health, because it's a process and it's going to happen. You're going to get that job, but unfortunately, it might not necessarily happen on the time frame that you have. So, but employers, there's still companies that are hiring, so definitely don't give up.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that I think we've had this discussion many times before, Simone, but men, especially white men, will only make like 40 to 60% of the job description and they'll go ahead and apply. Women will wait until they're 100% of the qualifications and then they apply. So think like a white man and apply for that job anyway. You will learn. Like rejection teaches you so much. So you will learn. Just go ahead and apply. Be strategic about it, but always feel the need to apply because you never know, you might get that job.
And I also want to add, if you know how to do everything in the job description, do not apply to the job, because what are you going to learn?
Right.
So I think sometimes we have to stretch ourselves because we're comfortable. Well, I was doing this in this job. Well, that's wonderful. But what are you going to learn? And after a while, you might end up in the same position where you start getting, okay, well, I'm here, I'm going. So if this is that opportunity to really explore what you want to do, and then also aim a little higher, if you, especially after you reviewed your skill set, your strengths, and the experiences that you bring.
Thank you. So it's now 8:55 and Dr. Myers is already telling me time. So this last question is for Dr. Hannah. and let me get this question. So oftentimes lay people misuse the word depression to describe when they're feeling down after the loss of a loved one. Can you explain the difference between complicated grief and depression, as well as could you explain seasonal affective disorder? Because I think a lot of people are now also experiencing seasonal affective disorder as it's the winter time.
That's an excellent question. Before I answer, I want to make sure I don't forget to mention a couple of good resources for those who are grieving. One is a website called bereavemed.com, bereavemed.com. I came upon this website. A young Black doctor interviewed at our residency to become a psychiatrist, and she actually started this website a couple of years ago in response to the death of her mother, and it's a really great resource for stories, for resources through grieving, and also for practical resources. You know, people have the death of a loved one, and then there's a lot of like logistical challenges, you know, arrangements, all kinds of things, and there are resources for that there. It's designed for medical students, but the resources available are useful for anyone who's lost a family member. And another resource that I would like people to know about is a book called On Grief and Grieving, Finding the Meaning of Grief Through the 5 Stages of Loss by a psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. So there's some excellent resources. To answer the question about grief and depression. So again, like these are symptoms, right? So when people think depression, they're usually thinking about actually dysphoria, which is like a more severe, persistent form of sadness, and that symptom can be common in a lot of different things. That symptom could indicate that a person has a major depressive episode, which is that symptom plus 5 out of 9 other symptoms for 2 weeks every day, persisting, or a major depressive episode could indicate the person has melancholic depression or atypical depression or psychotic depression or bipolar depression, or you can have depression related to persistent personality pathology. You can have dysphoria in simple bereavement. Complicated bereavement is a not recognized in the DSM-5, but it's something that they think exists and they feel need more information about, and that's essentially bereavement with a lot of other stipulations and with a longer length of time. But this is another thing. There's a lot of myths out there about like how it looks like, what the stages look like, how long you should be grieving, what's appropriate, and everyone's grief is different and personal. And so I think just normalize that if you're grieving, like your grief is not wrong, right? But if it's severe, a mental health professional can help you. Seasonal affective disorder is another way this dysphoria can present, based on the seasons. And I think these things are I said a lot of terms, they're complicated, and I think I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of different ways in which people can be suffering, and really finding a guide to help, figure out what your suffering means and like what, if there's treatment that can help, is really, really recommended. So if you're feeling that you're not feeling well, there's only strength in knowing that you need to reach out for help. No weakness in that.
Well, thank you. I think this was a really amazing show. I wish we had more time to cover more information, but I think the three of you did a really fabulous job. Of course, Mrs. Taylor, thank you again so much for telling your story, and may Jules rest in peace. He was a great individual. Even though I didn't know him for a long period of time, the little bit of time I did know him, he was a very funny and kind-hearted man, and I hope he continues to rest in eternal peace. And I also would like to thank Ms. Simone Wilson for coming back on the show. So many gems were dropped. I actually have to take what you said to heart. So if I see a job description, I should not just go for it if it's something that I can fulfill. I need to aim a little higher and give myself a little more worth. So I think that's something that was a really good gem that you shared. Also, if you're a little rusty with interviewing, practicing, getting out more to get yourself out there, I think that was really important. And I think also going back to Mrs. Taylor, there were some really great things that we also need to do, not only to better ourselves for the job market, but to how we can better ourselves by honoring our loved ones. So setting up a scholarship fund is our loved one's name, making a donation in their name to an organization. Also, you as the individual need to spend time with a good support group, as well as some me time with yourself. And I honestly would love to go hole up for a few days at the end of the year. But unfortunately, because of COVID, it keeps saying, stay home, don't go anywhere. But I think it is very therapeutic, especially for those who have been of us who are healthcare workers, who had to deal with the onslaught of such sick patients during COVID, that we do need some of that downtime. So I think that was very valuable, whether you've lost a loved one or you've lost a group of patients. Because for many of us, we lost more patients this year than we normally would as healthcare professionals. So I think that was very valuable. And then of course, Dr. Hannah dropped some gems about seeking help. A lot of times, especially in our community, mental health is stigmatized, and it's really important that we get the help that we need, whether it's going through the employee assistance program at our job or reaching out to people that we may know who are getting mental health services. It's not a sign of weakness, as we are often taught. Also, there's nothing wrong with sometimes going outside of our home, because that's another common thing that we're taught in our communities, that stuff that we suffer from stays in the house. But it's actually very therapeutic, and it can be very cathartic to let some of these issues out. So also, we have to keep in mind the bereavemed.com website, as well as the book 5 Stages of Grief, which was written by Dr. David Kessler and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, as other things that we can refer to during this tough time. We will be back again in 2 weeks to deal with grief. We're actually going to do it in Spanish. So we will put out the flyer for that as well, so we can reach our Latino population, our Black population that's not English speaking. Also want to remember something else that's very therapeutic during this time of year is to shop. It's really important that we're supporting our Black businesses as well. So as you know, we've been having several business owners on. So as a reminder, you can watch our old shows. They're always on YouTube or Facebook Live, but I'll just name some of the great Black and Latino businesses that we need to be supporting during this holiday season, because a lot of them are suffering due to the economic impact of COVID. So we had Sydney Sweets Bakery based in Hempstead. We have the Shop Beauty Bar in Jamaica, Queens. We also have Hella Bitters, great to mix with cocktails around this time of year. We also have Intelligent Minds Chess. If your kids are driving you crazy and you need something for them to do, she's giving chess lessons via Zoom. And last but not least, back to our career, we have Luis Guillamon, who is a career coach. So these are all Black and Latino businesses that we should be supporting at this time of year. Makes great for Christmas presents. And we thank you again for joining us tonight. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks when we're dealing with grief on Espanol. Buenos noches. Happy holidays. Stay safe.
Bye.